All right. Well, through the elements that is outside, which is pretty terrible, it just started pouring downtown. We are going to do our Reconstruction review for today, for tomorrow's test, excuse me, and of course for the final exam in less than a month. So uh, it looks like nobody's really in the viewing room. I didn't tweet out the link or anything, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to send out the link to people. I hope that, for the most part, people are watching and are able to follow along. Now, I'm going to try to look at the chat box and see if we can get a look at that later today, and see if we can possibly get some questions going on that. So, okay. I'm about to go ahead and remind out and tweet out the link. Do that now. New message. YouTube tutor session starts now. All right. Send that out to both classes. And also Twitter. So guys, as always, there's a bunch of ways to ask me questions, and the first and easiest way is just to send me messages via Twitter or Remind or by email. Today, though, we're going to see if something else works. If you guys go ahead and look at the live section, there is a comment section where you can leave comments there, but there's also this thing called Be Part of the Conversation. Now, if you click Be Part of the Conversation, you might be able to go to a certain area that leaves me questions. Now, I'm going to test this theory myself by going to a different window and seeing if it works. And I think it will, which is good, because I know for the most part, a lot of people have a hard time communicating with me about certain questions they want to ask and all that special stuff. So if you do that, yes, that should work. Maybe. Okay. Okay, so I'd see what happens. So what you have to do is, if you want to ask me questions, you have to have like a Google account and just sign in with your Google account. Okay. Awesome. So in the meantime, I'm just going to let everybody kind of get in here like they always do, just so that we're already at 6 people, which is like almost more than we had last week when we started off. So I'm gonna go get something to eat, because what would this be without me eating, right? All right. Whoa, that was crazy. Good God. All right, so my apartment just shook from the thunder. That was crazy. All right, let's do this review session. Anything? Freedmen's Bureau. What a great question to start out with. All right, so 1865. Abraham Lincoln is still president. It's March, the war is still going on. And what we have is this need. Now that the war is about to end, Lincoln is like, okay, we have to go and try to like free the slaves. And we're going to do that by, when we free them, we're going to give them basic human rights for the first time in America. Hold on, I'm just going to go get that. And so the Freedmen's Bureau was an idea to basically give former slaves education that they desperately needed. Because what happens is when you've been a slave your whole life, 99% of them didn't read or write. And so they weren't able to get that basic education and knowledge that they needed to be successful. But now, with the Freedmen's Bureau, they were able to get some basic rights. Now, that, for the most part, is kind of confusing because the radical Republicans expand the Freedmen's Bureau because they're abolitionists, because they believe in equality of the races. But the presidents, both Lincoln and Johnson, both don't believe in expanding those rights. In fact, you know, everybody credits Lincoln for being like this great hero for freedmen and slaves, but he's like kind of not. But compared him to Johnson, you know, Johnson's like a racist, and Johnson doesn't want to see any black people be successful. He basically wanted to have them be free, but work on farms. So slavery, but still just, you know, no chains or anything. So the Freedmen's Bureau gives them jobs, gives them education, gives them food, basic stuff like that. And like I said, it starts with Lincoln and then it gets expanded under the radical Republican Congress, even though Johnson tries to block it. All right. All right, 1 second. I'm going to go turn the air conditioning on. It's a little hot in here. All right. Awesome. Tonight's meal of the day is chorizo nachos. Probably not the healthiest thing for me to eat, but I worked really hard today. Ooh, that's not bad. That's pretty good. All right, let's see what else we got here. Let's go on to the tweet box. Maybe there's something there. Remember, if you have a question, YouTube comments, big, huge help right there for me, because that'll help me be able to look at what kind of questions. Not going to be, I mean, it's a long test, but pretty repetitive. We haven't taught that much. I'm not trying to go into too much American 2 detail. So just make sure that you guys are, for the most part, doing what you need to do to answer those questions. That study guide I gave you, those packets with the sub, those will be really helpful. Those of you that did it, that can use it, congratulations. Those of you who didn't, well, oh well, your loss. So, 7 or 6 of you, what would we like to talk about? Anything? Bueller? What were Lincoln's goal for preserving the Union? That's a good question. It's more of a Civil War question, not really a Reconstruction question, but when Reconstruction, Lincoln's plan itself is pretty standard. It's very Abraham Lincoln, meaning that it's not very severe and that it's very apologetic. So Lincoln's going to do this thing called the 10% plan. So Lincoln 10% plan. You can kind of remember that because a lowercase L is like a 1. Yeah, I don't know. That's how I always remembered it. So Lincoln wants to allow the South to come back pretty quickly. He doesn't want this to be like a severe punishment. He's not looking to enact revenge on the South. He's not looking to punish people. He barely wants to give freedmen rights. But what he's going to do is that he's going to allow new state governments to come back to the Union so long as 10% of the voting population agrees to do it. 10%. So like 1 out of 10 people, 10 out of 100 people. I mean, it's really simple. Like if I had you guys vote and say, okay, 10% of you decide you don't want to take a test, and then we don't have to take a test, it's going to be pretty easy to pass. So he wants to allow those states to come back into the Union by making the terms really easy. However, he does say that no matter what, every slave state, there will not be a slave state anymore. Like they have to adopt the 13th Amendment. There will not be slavery when they come back in. But yeah, for the most part, when the radical Republicans try to say you're not doing enough, they try to pass that Wade Davis bill, and he doesn't do anything. He pocket vetoes it, meaning that he doesn't actually sign the bill or veto the bill, or he doesn't sign it. He just kind of lets it die because he went to because they were in recess and they couldn't do anything about it. So, but that would be Lincoln's plan. Charles Sumner seems to come up a lot during Reconstruction. He does. For somebody that was almost beat to death in terms of like letting, being a, fan of slave or not being a fan of slavery, he is one of those radical Republicans with like Thaddeus Stevens. They are all about that abolition, and they're trying to not only free the slaves and make them freedmen, but also make freedmen's lives easier. Why? Because yes, they might have wanted them to be equal and treated them as equals, but if you think about it, Republicans, they needed more people to vote for them. So I don't want to believe that they were pandering to the black vote, but in a way, they kind of were, because they're like, hey, if you vote for us, we're going to give you education, we're going to give you jobs, we're going to give you your equality that you so rightfully deserve, and the Democrats won't. So it's like, you got to vote for us. You have to vote for us. So that's, it's just very interesting because it's hard, once again, to understand. I mean, Sumner, in my opinion, he's probably a pretty okay guy, considering the fact that like he did get caned for saying that slavery was an abhorrent evil and that, people were pimping the slave trade out. And I was like, oh, he's not a fan of this. So I would say that Sumner does come up a lot in Reconstruction, just like Thaddeus Stevens. They're just part of the radical Republicans. They want to, severely punish the South and make it really hard for them to get back, and not allow a lot of Democrats into political power. So that's pretty much about him. One of my students wants to know about the Tenure of Office Act. Okay, speaking of radical Republicans, you have the radical Republicans and you have Andrew Johnson. Democrat Johnson versus radical Republicans. Boom. They clash about everything. Radical Republicans want to give Civil Rights Act of 1866. Johnson vetoes it. They override his veto. So they make the 14th Amendment. They want to expand the Freedmen's Bureau. He doesn't want to. He vetoes it. This is going to be a common theme. Johnson's going to veto 29 bills passed by the radical Republicans. The radical Republicans are like, dude, we are trying to make this a better place. You are being regressive. And they go, okay, we're not going to get anything passed with Andrew Johnson. So let's come up with some, BS law that he's going to break, and then we can impeach him. And they do. They passed the Tenure of Office Act, meaning that just like when a president has to ask the Senate's approval to appoint somebody, well, he also has to ask their approval for them to fire somebody. and he fires a Secretary of War, somebody he never appointed. I think it was the guy under Lincoln, and he fired them, and they were like, gotcha. And sure enough, he went to impeachment trial. They filed the papers, and he almost got impeached, like taken out of office. He did get impeached, like, but he didn't get convicted. Therefore, he didn't have to, go to jail. But still, pretty huge moment in American history right there. All right, let's see. Let's see. I think we just took care of the Andrew Johnson versus that. My students say they'll watch later. Well, that's going to help you when you need a question asked. Really relying on people. Anything? Bueller? No, guess I'll just eat some of my nachos. Chorizo nachos. If you never had chorizo, I really recommend you have some. It is quite good. It's like spicy sausage, like pork sausage, super good. Don't eat too much of it though. It corrodes the stomach really bad. Ooh, that's good. That's real good. Switching it up, I've done Italian for a while. I got to be a little more culturally diverse with the food that I eat. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, we have another comment. Freed slaves voting. Okay, so when it comes to the freed slaves, the freedmen, they actually don't get the right to vote until the 15th Amendment, which didn't get passed until 1870. So think about that. They got freed in 1865 from the Civil War, but they couldn't vote for another 5 years. So that's kind of crazy that it took that long for them to vote officially. Like they couldn't, bar it. But yeah, the 15th Amendment, that allowed them the right to vote. And like I said, radical Republicans, man, I don't want to say they pander to the black vote, but once again, if somebody's like, we are the only ones that are going to help you vote for us, people are going to vote for them. I mean, it's kind of that same way today with liberals. If you look at the way the Democratic Party kind of panders to the poor people, I mean, that's kind of, you never see poor people vote Republican, especially in the cities. I mean, in the countryside, yes, but definitely not in the city. You never really see poor people in the city really voting Republican. And that's kind of what the radical Republicans were doing back then with the black vote. They were just like, hey, we will try to make your life easier, but we're the only one that's going to help. Democrats aren't going to help. They're going to take your rights away. I bet I looked really attractive there. Let's see. Some good questions. I like this one person who keeps asking questions. You just keep doing it, man. You're killing it right now. Anything else? Do you guys want to know anything about the plans? Anything about Grant? Anything? Sharecropping, tenant farming, pretty basic stuff, don't get me wrong. Ku Klux Klan, grandfather clause, poll taxes, anything? Come on. We're going to be done like a half hour. Well, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I could actually enjoy a Thursday night instead of tutoring you guys, which, don't get me wrong, I love to do, but little time to eat and watch some Netflix, man. I got some Archer to watch. The Enforcement Act. Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, so the Enforcement Act. This is 1870, and basically what it is that there were 3 laws that basically protected African Americans' rights to not only vote, but to hold office, like political office, and to serve on juries. This is something that has never happened before in American history, and it's really important that it does, because just like when women get the right to vote in 1919, this is a monumental, when Hiram, what's that guy's name? It's Hiram Stevens, I believe, becomes the first elected, Hiram Revels, he's the first guy who's elected to the House of Representatives, and there's Louisiana has the first black governor. You know, this is a really monumental part for Reconstruction. Reconstruction is like one of those things where it's like, it's going great. Everything's going up, 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 up. 1877, boom, crashes. And the only reason the Enforcement Act and other things like the 15th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 13th Amendment, all these things are working is because they're being enforced by the military. Like, they can't, which is the next question, military reconstruction. The idea is that the military, which you got to remember, the South is split into like 5 different districts. Think of like the Hunger Games. Instead of 13 districts, there's 5. And the government literally run, the army's there enforcing them and trying to keep these people from breaking laws. Except it's not like tyranny and trying to, squash Katniss Everdeen. It's like, hey, let these black people be people too. Because white people back then just couldn't bear to believe that black people are not only equal, but deserve to have jobs and run for political office and not be slaves. Crazy, right? Unbelievable. But yes, that's the Enforcement Act and military reconstruction. Remember, 1877, when the military leaves, when the military gets pulled out after Hayes becomes president in 1877, everything goes back to like pre-Civil War South. White people are in government. Black people are really mistreated, but now they're not worth anything because they're not slaves. So people are just like killing them. People are making their lives awful. Now, a bunch of African Americans are able to persevere through this, awful period of time, but they're living in fear, whether it's the Ku Klux Klan that's like going to kill them, or if it's an angry mob trying to lynch them. They're really living with like looking over their shoulder, making sure they're not doing anything wrong. And that's not the kind of life that they deserve to, have after being slaves for 150 plus years. Compromise of 1877. Okay. And then I'll get to the Grant scandals. Compromise of 1877. So everyone's pretty sick of all the scandals that we're going to talk about. Why don't we just do that in reverse order? That way we'll understand the compromise. So Ulysses S. Grant comes into presidency in 1869, and roommate just got home. Looks like he's got soaked in the rain.
Yes, sir, Mr. Clicchio.
That's right. That sucks. Anyways, so Ulysses S. Grant comes into power 1869, and people are like, oh yeah, this guy's awesome. He's the one who made Robert E. Lee surrender. He's going to be such a great president. It's not really the case. As decisive as this guy was on the battlefield, he was just so indecisive as a president. But it really wasn't his fault either, because the radical Republicans didn't help him in Congress because they were either taking bribes or they were just being super corrupt, whether it was the Pacific Railway, the Trans-Pacific Railway scandal, also known as the Credit Mobile scandal. And what happened there was the railroad company overcharged the government to build a railroad like 3 times the amount. So instead of something being like $100 million, it was $300 million. So when this company got rich, and what happened was they paid off Congress people to let it happen. So this all got out in 1872. Grant didn't do anything. Like, he was like, I wasn't there when that happened. It started under Lincoln. But it got out during 1872, so of course he looked responsible. And then you have the whiskey ring scandal, and basically they were allowing whiskey distillers to not pay their taxes, and once again, bribing those people. And Grant kind of covered it up a little bit, trying to defend his friend who was the Internal Revenue Specialist, because they didn't have the IRS back then. They just had some guy who was like the major tax collector. And he's like, no, that's my friend. He's like, he's not going to do that. And he did, and he got into a lot of trouble. He was sent to prison for years. And Grant was like, oh, God, I just vouched for this guy, and he's totally guilty, so now I look stupid. You have that, and then you have the inability to control the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, Grant has the military, but he's very hesitant on using it because he doesn't want the South to feel like they're becoming martyrs for this cause. So basically, tie that all in. In 1874, the midterm elections, Democrats start to get get elected into Congress instead of the Republicans. And so what happens is there's more of a balance between Democrats and Republicans in Congress. So the radical Republicans can't really just pass anything easily. And then in 1877, after Grant's 2 terms are done, not only does he die a very penniless man, you have the 1877 compromise where Rutherford B. Hayes comes in, and he barely wins because of a backdoor deal done in the Congressional Committee, where he won because he agreed, if I become president, then I'll pull all the troops out of the South. Once again, that roller coaster, think of like going to Carowinds or Six Flags, and you go all the way up, and then it's just a super drop. That's essentially Reconstruction. What you doing, bud? He broke the microwave. Just unplug it. If we die, it's his fault.
Save the day. Cut the red one.
Good God, man. Microwave won. My roommate, nothing. Okay, so that's pretty much all you need to know for the compromise. After the compromise, everything goes really bad. Black people's lives in the South, not great. Jim Crow laws, black codes, not good. It's just not good for anybody. Well, if you're white, then it's good, I guess. Let's see. 3 new messages. Let's show those. All right, I got those all done. Let's see. Any more questions there? Well, there's 11 of you. Does any one of you 11 have questions? No? All right. So is it like raining up there in the north part of this city? Because it's pretty disgusting out downtown. Like, I was running, turned around, and like sprinted back to the apartment. Not a place I want to be. Kind of almost forgot that I had to do this, so really glad I ended my run when I did. I was like, oh yeah, I gotta go tutor people about Reconstruction. Which apparently is going to take like no time at all because you guys, you know, aren't really asking any questions. All right, Jim Crow laws, grandfather clause, rise of the KKK. All right, so let's start with the KKK. They are a white supremacist group that believe in power of white people. And that white people are inherently better because we can sunburn very easily. It's true. Now, jokes aside, the KKK is a ruthless bunch of people, racists, bigots, idiots, And the thing is, when they start because a guy, Nathan Bedford Forrest, really wants to take back the South and have rich white people, control the government because they're being oppressed, so to speak, by, the radical Republicans. Now, the KKK starts to use violence to really intimidate and try to scare away black people. And even Nathan Bedford Forrest, the guy who starts the KKK, he is all about oh man, I've really taken this too far. I shouldn't do this. And he disavows the KKK. And it's really bad because happens is he really starts this whole clan, and he can't even see it through because they just take off. Now, they are responsible for murders. They are responsible for lynchings. They are responsible for kidnapping. They're a terrorist organization. There's no other way around it. Still to this day, the KKK is a terrorist organization. Now, they might not be as violent nowadays as they were previous in 1800s, in the 1900s, but they are most certainly a terrorist organization when they commit those kind of human atrocities that they have in their past. If we look at the other concept, what was the other question? Part of that question. Hold on. Oh, so after the 1877, they pulled the troops out. Southern Democrats start to control the government again, and what they do is they really focus on how can we stop black people from achieving their 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment rights. So sharecropping is their stopping of no slavery. They basically put black people on plantations and say, this is your part of the plantation, and how much you work, you're going to share it with us. Sharecropping, you share the crops. Tenant farming, you go to market, you sell your crops for profit. We take a majority of your profits. So basically, they're working all day, hot sun. They have to buy the tools and stuff from their former masters, for most of them, but they're plantation owners that they're on. They don't really make a lot of money, so they're pretty much bound to that land. This is essentially slavery without the chains. And the worst part is that white people are also sharecropping, and they're jealous that black people are taking their jobs. And so what do? Well, this is where the KKK comes in. If someone's a really, good sharecropper, he might, get scared. They might, put a burning cross in his yard and have them leave, or they'll kill him and his family and try to give the white people those sharecropping jobs. Now, if we look at the 14th Amendment, which is this whole equality, everyone's treated fairly and there's balance, they start to use Jim Crow laws and segregational laws and black codes and really trying to discriminate and separate the races, because once again, there's that idea that white people are somehow superior for some unknown reason that we still don't understand to this day. And the idea here is that, you have different bathrooms, different restaurants, different train cars, and somebody finally gets upset with this and sues the government in 1898. Homer Plessy, he's like, first of all, I'm pretty much white. He's like, I'm 7/8 white. Grandfather is black. Why am I being treated so unfairly? And the Supreme Court justice ruled that, hey, you know what? As long as you're separate but equal, there's really no problem here. The only problem is that those establishments were never really equal. Black establishments, whether it was schools, whether it was restaurants, whether it was train cars, they were all either not up to code or they were poorly underfunded, and they were not equal in the slightest bit. It's pouring outside. Now, if we look at the 15th Amendment, they don't technically stop African Americans from voting. So what did they do? Well, they made it really, really hard, and at times pretty impossible. Number one, poll taxes. They literally charge people to vote. You had to pay to vote. If you're a sharecropper, you literally don't make any money. So how are you going to pay this? You can't. If you look at, if you look at the grandfather clause, which said if your grandfather could vote, then you don't have to pay a poll tax. Most people who were black, their grandfathers were slaves, so they couldn't vote because they were slaves. So that didn't apply to them. And then literacy test. If you were in my class, you took a literacy test. So many people got frustrated, and you guys have formal education. You're talking about people who maybe got 5 years of education under their belt and were like, okay, this is unfair. I literally don't know what I'm doing here. And that was preventing them from voting, from making their lives better. I know my kids were joking, this is so stupid, blah, blah, and it is stupid. But think about if I told you, you have to do this. You can't get one wrong. It has to be perfect, or else, you don't get you get an F for the year. I'm going to deny you the chance because of this one little literacy test. And that's kind of the challenges to these to those 3 amendments. And that's just, the legal stuff. Then you talk about the lynches, and you talk about the KKK and the terror going through the South at that time. It's not a great place to be at that time in the late 19th century, early 20th century. In the economy, money was an issue. Why was that? Okay, so the question is about the Panic of 1873. Well, that's a really good question because we really didn't talk about that for the most part. It all starts in England, because why wouldn't it? Basically, at that time when we are reliant on foreign markets, if the foreign market crashes, we also crash. You have to remember, there's a lot of money out there, whether it was greenbacks in the US or graybacks in the Confederacy. There was a lot of money, and the South was just printing a lot of it during the Civil War, so there's a lot of money just laying around. What happens when you have a lot of money just laying around and you just keep printing more of it? I heard that. You're right. Inflation. The value of the dollar goes down. And so that kind of happened. So you talk about the foreign market in Europe kind of collapsing, and then you talk about the post-Civil War inflation. Yeah. We're also going to see our bank reserves kind of go plummeting as well. They kind of drop, and basically we're not really worth anything. And that's really the problem here, is that we try really, really hard to, survive this panic. But the worst part is that when people are losing their jobs because they're not making a lot of money, or companies aren't making a lot of money and they can't keep them, the government decided to raise their salaries. Grant's like, I deserve more money. You, all of you Congress people who are all lying and cheating and corruption, you all get raises. All people are like, are you kidding me? I got fired. I don't make any money, and you just raised your own salary. So, yeah, Grant just dug himself a deep hole on that one. I can't really even defend that one. That one was stupid. It's probably all the alcohol he drank. His brain was probably mush. All right, up to 14 people. I'm surprised some people are even watching. A lot of my students. I'm very proud of you all right now. Let's see. Plessy versus Ferguson. We already talked about that. Separate but equal. Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. It's real simple. So that one isn't too hard. It's kind of like one of those Supreme Court cases that you have to know because it'll probably be on the test. But then again, it might not be on your test, but it might. I don't know. I don't even know what the American One test looks like, to be honest. There's only been like one final because last year was like the guinea pig year. Is that it? Are we good here? Do we have any more questions? Because like if we don't, I'm just like totally gonna log off. So if you have any questions, now is the time. Now is the time. There's no better time than right now. What is the difference between black codes and Jim Crow laws? Ooh, that is a great question. So when it comes to black codes happen earlier in history than Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws are very post-Reconstruction. Black codes are like legitimately 1865, 1866, the South tried to save some face after the losing the Civil War. They're like, yeah, we might have lost the slaves, but black codes, boom. Just like slides it in, and it's just like, oh, okay, interesting. Just gonna throw that one in our face. Nope, that's fine. You could say that they were really early Jim Crow laws, but at the same time, you know, they were mainly there to like restrict basic constitutional rights. Like, for instance, you know, black codes would stop. They would not allow them to congregate. Like a lot of black people would meet together. You couldn't buy like a gun. You couldn't obviously vote at the time. You couldn't try to run for political office. But a lot of them were very, very specific to, excuse me, they were very specific to trying to stop them from contributing to the economy, which is really dumb because you would think that like you would really want those people trying to contribute to the economy, but you know, don't get me wrong. But basically what happened was like when you look at black codes, sorry, I was just reading an email. When you have black codes, what they're doing is that they are, you know, one instance is that you couldn't have somebody work more than a year-to-year contract. So basically, they weren't permanent. They were on like a labor basis, and you know, if they weren't gonna take the job that they were offered, let me try this again. So you have one specific instance where if you're offered a job, it's on a year-to-year contract. So it's like you could be fired at any time and then you'd be, you know, out of luck. But if you refuse, you would get arrested and forced into unpaid labor. Really? So unpaid labor, aka slavery. So take this crappy job. If you refuse, we're going to arrest you and make you become a slave. Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. So, especially the two states that you really want to focus on in terms of black codes are South Carolina and Mississippi. And it pretty much, like the one in South Carolina, it was pretty bad. It said that you know, African Americans couldn't hold any other job than being a farmer. Okay, that's cool. It's like, oh, you're black, so farmer. It's like, that's okay, cool. So they couldn't do anything that they wanted. And once again, if they said no, well, you know what that means? You're getting arrested and you're being thrown onto a plantation where you're going to farm anyways. So the good thing is that a lot of these were hard to force during the in the South during Reconstruction because the Army was there, the Federal Army, and the Federal Army was not going to take kind to that. Under Andrew Johnson, though, when Johnson's president, he's like, great, cool, I hate black people, I'm Andrew Johnson. And it's like, dude, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? We know, like, the radical Republicans are like, we're trying to make a life better for these people, yet you are agreeing with these black codes, telling them that they should not be anything more than farmers, and then when they refuse, arrest them, throw them onto a plantation to work for free. So we're going back to pre-Civil War times, or I don't know. Basically, that's Johnson. Good old Andrew Johnson. All right, let's see. The Civil Rights Act of 1866, yeah, we talked about that. That's like the early one where Andrew Johnson was like, no, we are not going to give, free civil rights to black people. And then Congress is like, 2/3 majority, bro, we just going to override that veto. And they did. And they did that 14 other times. So, and then the Civil Rights Act of 1866 would turn into the 14th Amendment, which is anybody born in the United States is a citizen, and everybody's supposed to be treated treated equally under the law, fair treatment under the law, and an extension of the Bill of Rights to them as well. Like the Bill of Rights extends to those people as well. So, yeah, there's the Civil Rights Act of 1866. All right, I don't think I have any other questions. So I'm going to jet off about 14 minutes early. I've pretty much gone over what I need to do, but if you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me or shoot me a text, and I will be more than happy to help you, okay? Go get some sleep tonight, study up. You guys got this, all right? Later.